Hello students, this is Miss Dalton and we're going to do Notes 3-8, which is simplifying radicals. So when you're simplifying radicals, a radical is just, could either be a square root sign, it could be a cubed root sign, but it's going to look like this. Now we're used to doing the square root of a perfect square, like the square root of 9, and you should know that the square root of 9 is 3. But how do we get that? Well, if you break down 9, you get 3 times 3. So that's really the square root of 3 squared. And the square root is the inverse operation of the exponent 2. And so they cancel each other out, and that's why the square root of 9 is 3. Now we're going to use this in simplifying radicals where you don't have a perfect square. So let's look at some examples. In our first example, we have the square root of 75. So what I want you to do is, first of all, the square root of 75 is not a perfect square. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to need to break it down into the prime factors. So just start at the beginning. So just think of anything that you can multiply together to get you 75. And so I just know that's going to be 3 times 25. That's one option. And now just keep breaking it down until you can't factor it anymore. 25 is 5 times 5. And then now what you have is you have these prime factors, 3 times 5 times 5. So we could write that as the square root of 3 times 5 times 5. Now in this first example, I'm going to show you exactly what you're doing, and then I'll show you how you can do some of this in your head or before you write down what your answer is. So this is the same thing as 3 times 5 squared, and if you remember, you can take the square root of 5 squared because that's going to cancel out the exponent of 2. So what we end up having is we have the square root of 3 times the square root of 5 squared, but the square root of 5 squared is just 5. So we're going to put the 5 in the front, and that is 5 times the square root of 3. So this right here, you have to put it in the front. If you put it at the back and put the square root of 3 times 5, technically it's okay, but what ends up happening is then you get a little sloppy with your square root sign, and I can't tell which number is supposed to be under the square root, and so we've got 5 on the outside. So your answer is 5 times the square root of 3. Example 2, now we have the square root of 720. So just start breaking it down as best you can, and you can start anywhere. Now I noticed that 10 times 72 will give me 720, and then just keep going. 10 breaks down to be 5 times 2. 72, one way that I could do it is 9 times 8. Okay, 5 is a prime, 2 is a prime, 9 breaks down 3 times 3, and then 8 breaks down 2 times 4. So we have all these prime numbers, 5, 2, 3, 3, 2, and then 4 breaks down 2 times 2. What you want to look for is you want to look for pairs of numbers, because that's going to be the same thing as that number squared. So I notice that I have a pair of 2's, I have a pair of 3's, and I also have another pair of 2's right here. So all of these pairs, when I take the square root of them, they are going to get to come to the outside. So on the outside, I'm going to have a 2 times another 2, because I had 2 pairs of 2, and then times a 3, and then the only thing that's left on the inside of my radical is a 5. So if you have multiple numbers that get to come to the outside of that radical, make sure you multiply them back together. 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 3 is 12, and so my final answer is 12 times square root 5. And what you can do is you could type this in on your calculator, 12 times the square root of 5, and then type in the square root of 720, and they should give you the same decimal answer. So that's how you could check your answer. Okay, number 3, we're going to go ahead and start breaking down the 24. So that's one way to do it is 3 times 8. 3 is a prime, break down 8, 2 times 4, and then 2 is a prime, and then break down 4, 2 times 2. So we've got all prime numbers. And I notice that I have a pair of 2s, so I'm going to go ahead and circle that. Now let's break down the x to the 4th. Well, x to the 4th is just x times x times x times x. So what we end up having here is we have 2 pairs of x. And then y to the 3rd is y times y times y, so we have a pair of y's. So all of my pairs are going to get to come to the outside of that radical. So I'm going to have 2 x times x, that's going to give me x squared, and then I have a y. That's on the outside. Then I'm going to draw my radical, and what's left on the inside? Well, I have a 3 and a 2, but multiply those back together, and that gives you 6, and then I have a y. So here is your final answer, 2x squared y, square root of 6y. Okay, on this last one, I'm going to have you do it by yourself. So pause the video and then press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, here's the final answer. You should have gotten negative 8x squared times the square root of 7x. One thing I want you to keep in mind is when there's a number on the outside already, like right here, you've got that negative 2, at the end, you have to bring it back out to the outside and multiply it by everything else that you took to the outside of the radical, because otherwise it's not going to be a true statement. So there's your final answer. I hope y'all did well, and we will see you in class tomorrow.